Hey everyone, this is Hashem. Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm doing an introductory video on how I edit a photo series for a zine or similar purpose. Now I want to clarify that I'm by no means an expert and I've only recently started to get into this, but I thought I would share some of the things that have worked for me along the way. And I want to clarify also what I mean by editing being the selecting and curating and sequencing of the images for a series, as opposed to something like post-processing, which some people infer from the word editing. So the last series that I put together was for my zine entitled The Sun-Dried Strip, which I put out some time ago. And this one was entirely shot on film. So in the case of this project, I had all the rolls that I shot for the series developed and printed in 6x4 format, but also scanned in low resolution as a minimum. Some of the rolls had higher resolution, but I would recommend getting low res scans as a minimum if you're going to be working digitally to put the zine or book out, or perhaps publish it on a website or exhibition, or whatever it might be. So if you're also working with film, you can start with scans only, but I highly recommend getting 6x4 prints of at least your keepers, of your primary selection of anything that's just not rubbish that you're definitely not going to include in the series, because working with the proof prints will be a great way for you to edit the series as you're shooting it as time goes on. So what I do also is use Lightroom for all my scans, or if you're working completely digitally, I like to use a collection in Lightroom. So create a collection for all the images you're working with, because the benefit of that, as opposed to working straight from the folders, is that you can reorder the images in a collection in order to start to get a feel for how the photos work in series, in sequence, and to look at them next to each other and kind of get a sense for the final selection. So in Lightroom, I use the tools and built-in features for culling and selecting and giving the images ratings. So what I'd use is, for example, the flags to make a preliminary selection of anything that's a definite candidate, that's definite possibility, and then maybe reject images that are just completely rubbish. And then I use things like the color labels to give different categories to the images if you're working with different sub-series, or you want to give the images different categories. And then also you've got the star ratings. You can use them all concurrently, and something like the star ratings for myself, I will give a 5 star to anything that's just a definite keeper. It's definitely going to make the final selection, and then working down to 4 stars and so on. And then with my 6x4 prints, I lay them all out and have a look at them and see how they work in physical form, how they look next to each other. And I even just sometimes leave little notes on the back of the prints to start to get a feel and further refine the selection down towards the final number that I'm looking for. And most recently, I got this metal board and put it up on the wall, which is a great way of doing this if you want to have the photo series just up all the time in the background of whatever your workspace is, so that you can constantly have them in the background, see how they feel with time, because that can often change. You might have a photo that you initially liked, and then a month down the track, you might start to feel like it doesn't quite belong within the context of the rest of the series. And this simple metal board is great because you can put up the prints with magnets and just easily shift them around, swap them, and remove anything that just may no longer fit the series. And it's a pretty cheap and effective way to have a series that you're working on living currently as you're actually shooting it, as time's going by, and allowing you to kind of edit as you go. And this one is a fairly cheap and affordable way to go about it. I went to the local hardware store supply, here being Bunnings, and bought this pre-cut sheet of galvanized steel. You want to make sure you go with a magnetic metal, obviously, try and avoid aluminium or anything like that, which isn't magnetic. And then I just bought these cheap little magnets on eBay. A pack of 100 or something like that was only a few bucks. So really easy, really simple way to put up photos for a series, to edit it as you go, because physically looking at it is always different to bringing it up digitally and moving them around on a little screen. This way you get a better sense for how it's going to feel physically. So once I finish shooting all the series and narrow down the selection to the final amount that I'm aiming for, or close to it, that's when I start to look at the images in Lightroom again using Survey View, because Survey View is really powerful in that it lets you put images side by side, kind of how they would look on paper inside of a book or zine next to each other, to give you a better idea of sequencing. An even better way to do this, or to do it on top, is to actually just get a blank notebook, and if you've already got your 6x4 prints, you can place them inside the pages of the notebook and get a feel of how they would look as you're flipping through pages side by side, to get a better idea of the sequence when looking at it physically. So using this method of just looking at everything up on a board, putting them into a blank notebook, Survey View in Lightroom, using the collections, reordering it, You just sort of rinse and repeat that process until you're happy with your final selection. And at that point, it's worth putting together a test print of the zine, for example, as a booklet, in which case I got one made just on really cheap A4 booklet paper from the local office supply place, Officeworks here, as a proof print, just to see how it feels actually flipping through it as a zine, before then ordering the full quality prints from whatever print place you're going with. At that point, I would also recommend doing a proof print from that printing company in case something looks a little bit different in print. And if you want more information on zines in particular and some of those details when it comes to printing, finding the correct paper, all that sort of stuff, I have a separate video that I can link in a card up here that I've done in the past about putting a zine together. But hopefully some of this was helpful to you if you're more focused on the editing side of things, on sequencing, on putting together your own photo series. So let me know if it was helpful, or if you're more experienced and have any other tips you'd like to share with me or anyone else watching. Put them in the comments. It might be helpful to someone else who's going through the process of putting together a series, which is a lot of fun, something I'd highly recommend. So feel free to share your experience. What has worked for you, whether it's putting together something for a book or a zine or an exhibition or some kind of online publication. I find that the editing part of the process is actually quite fun. It's quite important to see how the images look together, what makes the final selection, how you sequence them if it's in a printed booklet, for example. So yeah, that's what's worked for me. I hope some of this was helpful and that you got something out of it. Good luck to anyone out there who is putting together a series, and thanks for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.